All right, everyone. Welcome to our very first TFP podcast, or the Filipino Podcast, hosted by me, Hannah, and my co-host, Norman.
I am no-
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. It's still saying that you're still lagging.
Okay, it shows to me like I just timed it. I think you're like 10 seconds delay, so you're fine. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and transition to the very first slide. We have introductions. Woo! So, don't you love the waving bandera in the background, Norman? I
I wonder
spent
where did you get that? I'm wondering.
Canva. I literally just went on one of the devices and I was like, type in waving
You
Filipino
actually,
flag.
you
Yeah,
actually did that on camera?
yeah, on Canva you can look for it. They have like models of it. I'm definitely sure this is like AI generated, but it's passable. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce
Jason.
myself.
I know that for sure. Maybe we don't know.
That's all good. All right, so introducing myself, my name is Hannah. I dub myself Professor Hannah. And oh, actually, I actually wrote a script here for myself to introduce myself in Tagalog. Oh my god, I'm gonna try. Okay, I'm gonna try. So maybe I should say it like this. Hello mga kababayan, ako po si Hannah. Nagdating ako sa US nasa 4 years lang. Yung Tagalog ko ay parang hindi ko pwede mag-alala yung mga Tagalog words sa moment I need them. Purong English sa utak ko. Parang nagiging Englishero naman ako. Yun kasi hindi ko nagpa-practice Tagalog sa bahay at hindi ako nakakorektahan ng mga magulang ko. Parang ubos ang mga Tagalog ko sa sobrang man, I can't even read my script. I'm sorry. Parang ubos ng magtagalog ko at sobrang nakainis ako kasi nag-feel ko parang nagkakalimut. I can't even shush, Norman. Parang nagkakalimutan ko ng identity ko sa Pilipinas. Like, the thing though that I know about myself is if I am reading a Tagalog script, I tend to I don't know what happens to me. Like, I can do it when my eyes are closed. I can do it with my eyes closed, like if I'm not looking at it, but for some reason my Tagalog, whenever I'm reading, it's just like I'm stuttering, I'm stumbling over it. It's like I'm not literate when it comes to Tagalog. I just realized that. It's just like, what is happening to me?
Mine, mine too. Sometimes I stutter. Sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I stutter so much when I am reading it out loud. That's my difficulty in Tagalog, because I didn't read a lot of Tagalog books, so I would be like, the heck am I reading? But in any case, so putting that into English, I arrived in the US at 4 years old, and basically in my whole spiel that I said in Tagalog, I was saying how it's really difficult for me to remember words in Tagalog, especially at the moment when I need them. It's only like English words come into my head. I also have really bad brain fog in English too, so it's just like it doesn't really help. I have brain fog in like all languages I learn and speak. And I was saying like how I feel like I'm more of an English person nowadays because I know English more, and it's mainly because of my parents don't encourage me to speak Tagalog to them, and because I miss out on so much practice, and because they do not correct me in English. Not English. They don't correct me in Tagalog. What happens is my Tagalog has a lot of like derivational issues. I use the wrong word, or maybe I use the wrong tense form and I'm not aware of it, It's because I'm only strictly limited to like conversational English. I mean, conversational Tagalog. Why am I saying English? But yeah, that's very frustrating for me because I feel like the more I don't use my Tagalog, the more I feel like I'm losing my identity as a Filipina. And it just really upsets me and makes me feel very frustrated to kind of feel like I'm losing my identity just knowing English, Because in a way, I feel like language does extend to how you perceive oneself, But in any case, I have my degree here. I just graduated, got my master's in linguistics, and my emphasis is in TESOL. So English is definitely my forte. Anything and everything with English, just ask me. Hopefully I have the answer, but if not, like if we go into historical linguistics territory, that's probably where I'm like, nope, I'm so limited on that. I know English enough. Like, I can teach the grammar, I can teach the pronunciation, the nuances, the accent, how to get, yeah, all this stuff. But anywhere with historical linguistics, I'm like, no, that's not my department, brother. Just stop there. And then my interests I've listed here are singing, dancing, writing, learning languages, and my all-time obsession with Spy Family, the anime, just because they have like a lot of linguistic stuff in it. That's why I'm like head over heels. Like, I'm so deep like into that rabbit hole of Spy Family. It's just like there's a lot of linguistic stuff going on, and that's why I'm just obsessed with
Oh
it.
yeah, we all know that.
It's not a, yeah. Literally, you can just see my bag and like my phone and everything. You can see everything is some sort of like Spy Family influence. So I think it's like not a secret that I'm like high-key obsessed with that series. Okay, so Norman, now it's your turn.
Hmm. All right, so it's my turn. So hi, like what I said, my name is Norman. As it says on the video, I got here when I was 14 years old. That is when my English was a little bit not that good, to be honest. So how I practiced my English was basically talking to my peers, especially when I go to school. I started in seventh grade. So, oh wait, no, seventh. Oh no, eighth grade. So what happened was, they put me in a middle school towards the end of towards the end of the school year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose for that one is to actually just like practice my English or to interact with my classmates, which really helped because when I was in high school on a ninth grade, that is where I kind of improved my English. So basically, I'm listening to the teacher. If I have a question, I would raise my hands, talking to my peers, stuff like that, and that's how I basically practice my English.
Oh, that's so interesting.
If you, yeah, basically how I started. And if you're wondering, I am Filipino. I actually speak two languages in the Philippines. One of them is Tagalog, which is I'm very good at. Um, I actually speak. I also understand slash speak what a lot of Filipino would considered deep Tagalog. Um, yeah, I can speak that as well. Also, I speak Hiligaynon or Ilonggo. But that one, I can understand it. But when it comes to like speaking Ilonggo or Ilonggo. So when it comes to speaking Ilonggo, I'm a little bit, I'm not sure if I can do it correctly. So
Mm-hmm.
just like what Hannah, I'm linguistic majors. I'm getting my master's right now in TESOL in progress. So this semester is my last semester. When it
Woo!
comes to interest, to be honest, a lot of my time is actually dedicated to linguistics because um, I don't know why, to be honest. Again, linguistics is very interesting for me. For me, it has a special place in the heart, of course. But outside linguistics, I do like playing video games. The last video game that I played is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and there's actually a new one, and I actually forgot the name, which is it's still called Assassin's Creed, but like I don't know, like the full title, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, I like trying new things basically. So if there's something that I haven't tried before, I would like to try it as long as it's safe and won't hurt or kill me. I would do it. Also, I try to go to gym as much as I can, but again, sometimes I get a little busy because of work, school, personal life. Sometimes I don't even have time for gym. Oh, also, I love Star Trek. So if you have any questions about Star Trek, either the movie or the TV show, I can answer it to you. Like I'm the Star Trek person as well.
Nice.
Between the two of us.
I'm gonna leave that in your department, brother, because I am not a sci-fi girl. So Star Trek is all yours, buddy.
It's all mine.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
yours.
Just leave it to me.
Okay. So if we have anyone in the group or listeners who are Star Trek fans or Spy Family fans, yeah, deliver us some questions our way. It'd be fun to talk about it in this stream or in this podcast. Okay. So thank you for introducing yourself. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next segment, which is review pop quiz. What is TFP?
Yeah.
So I want to
Who
ask
came up
this.
with that name?
You did. You did. I actually really like that. Yeah, I was asking around. I was like, what should we call the podcast? And Norman was saying, let's call it TFP. And I was like, okay, why TFP? And he said, think about TFC. And I was like, oh my God, yes, yes, I like that. So we have the Filipino channel, TFC. Now we have TFP, the Filipino Podcast. So
Podcast.
yes. So what I would like to ask you, Norman, is what is TFP? Like, if you were to describe your vision for this podcast.
Well, when I was envisioning this podcast, I was thinking that we would talk about anything that is under well, basically we're gonna talk about the linguistic that happens within the Philippine Islands, basically. Most of the time we're gonna speak about Tagalog, but sometimes we're also gonna touch on some other languages, on some other regional languages as well. So we're gonna touch on Ilocano, we're gonna touch on Bicol or Ilonggo. Well, sometimes we might talk about Ilonggo because again, I speak or understand Ilonggo a little bit better. But basically, we're just gonna talk about anything linguistic that happens within the Philippine Islands, basically, and that is what I'm envisioning for the podcast.
Nice. I was also thinking that since with TFP, my interest with Philippine culture and the language is very close to heart to me. It's mainly because while growing up, I was unfortunate enough to not learn about the Philippine history, the culture and stuff because I grew up in America. And like I mentioned, at 4 years old, I was brought into a preschool classroom first. And because of that experience, it's just like, I didn't have a chance to understand my culture that well. So, of course, I think that's where a lot of people feel like, whenever they say, oh, Uy, Filipino, right? Like, I think it's because we're not talked about a lot while we were young and we wanted more representation. So the moment we see Filipinos being represented on media, people get excited because, it's our fellow kababayan on there, So I was hoping with TFP.
Yeah, we have that Filipino pride, as they say.
Oh yeah, we do. Definitely. That's like, it's not a secret. I think
There's
this
even
is
that
great.
meme that says that when someone was speaking Tagalog and the guy would say, Uy, nagtagalog, Philippines! Woo! Philippines! Woo! It's like, again, that's like an example of a Filipino pride that we have.
You did it so well. Wow, Norman. That's so funny. So I'm really looking forward to this. Mainly because, the reason why I'm very ecstatic and so excited about TFP is because I'm looking to Norman as the Filipino expert because I know he's very interested. I mean, even our supervisors even say, oh yeah, we have a student who's a Philippine expert and it's Norman. I was like, oh yeah, that's my friend. So yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah. Uy, Philippines! Nagtagalog siya! Oh, uy, Philippines!
Oh, Philippines!
That's so funny.
Sorry, keep going.
That's so funny. But yeah, you get what we mean. So it's really nice to be reintroduced to the culture, being more in touch with the motherland, the mother language and everything. So I'm hoping to learn new things on here, and while other people who are also interested to learn more about the Philippine culture and the languages and linguistics and all that stuff, feel free to tune in. And I'm pretty sure Norman's excited because this is his field of discipline, other than TESOL, of course. So I can't wait to hear all the interesting things he finds about for us to discuss on TFP.
Can I just add one more thing too?
Yeah.
Before we move on?
Yeah, of course, go for it.
Okay. So another reason why while I was envisioning the podcast is that I don't know where I read this, but it says that there are not a lot of Filipino linguists within the Philippines. And
Oh,
Philippines, again, is such a diverse country. Again, it has a lot of languages that's not even recognized. And I'm not talking about the popular regional dialects, but there are regional languages, but the other languages that are not even recognized, or that we don't even know that it existed, and then it died because the last speaker was either switched to regional languages, or just died. So hopefully the podcast would shed on those lights to the other languages as well, or just to actually educate Filipinos on what's happening when it comes to linguistic fields in the Philippines.
yes, that's actually a really really good point because when you mentioned that languages do extinct, especially very small communities, if there's no one there that can practice the language or a popular language takes over, it kills a language. So therefore, yes, a language can die. A language can become extinct because no one is producing that language. No one is able to give you the nuances, the small applications of how words are put together, like grammatically, syntactically. Sorry, I'm saying the same thing. Syntactically, semantically, pragmatically. We lose out on those nuances, you know? Like anyone can learn grammar and you can pick up the how a language is put together, but you miss out on the culture once it dies. You know, like saying slang languages,
Yeah.
for example, we can know we can use the word and apply it as its literal semantic value, but the pragmatics is like that's where the culture comes in, you know? And
Mm.
semantics also does run into culture, but it's more of like understanding how words change over time and their meaning and stuff. But enough of that. We are gonna go ahead and transition on to the next topic, and we'll save the conversation that we're having maybe for a future stream or a future podcast. So let's go ahead and move on to the next question, which is, let's talk about my project. So this one,
Per project.
yes, this is a very, very, very big project that I want to talk about, and it just ties into the video which we will watch later. That's called Six Filipinos versus One White Man by Jubilee. We'll talk about that again in that episode, but here I do want to highlight this because I know this is a conversation that's also very important to Norman, and this was actually my final research paper before I completed my master's degree. It's called Ideologies on Philippine Languages from the Perspective of Bilingual Speakers. Technically, I should have said multilingual, but for the sake of simplicity and because when you're a researcher, you have to be very, very specific about about the people that you're researching. You have to get the common ground for everyone. So I'm not saying that the people who were used in the study were all bilingual, because my dad, for example, was multilingual. He knows various of Philippine different languages that are being spoken in the Philippines. But as for my mom, she only knows two. My grandma was also limited to two. So that being said, I just stuck with the word bilingual speakers. So just to clarify that small nuance there, that doesn't mean that bilingual applies to all three. So with this project, I focused, the focus of my research was conducted as a library research. I interviewed 4 bilingual speakers born and raised from the Philippines, and all the speakers spoke both Tagalog and Ilonggo. And then what I did was do a comparison of language ideologies across eras. So we're talking about my lola, my mom, and my dad. And then, of course, I had Norman also play as a role in the project as well. He was my 4th pick. And I really like this whole idea of just like comparing people across different eras and seeing how maybe if the education system had changed and what the requirements were. But yeah, we're going to move on to what the main points were. So the first part of my study was talking about the etymology of the Philippine languages. So etymology is a very fancy way of saying the origins. So what is the Philippine history, in other words? What I'm limiting, though, in terms of history is just focusing on linguistics, because after all, when you talk about linguistics, it is going to overlap with multiple disciplines. It's going to overlap with science, it's going to overlap with history, anthropology, geography, etc. The list can go on. A lot of factors can influence linguistics. And my second point is basically understanding the tensions amongst Philippine language groups due to language policy, which did happen. And the last point was language ideologies across time. But for the sake of simplicity, again, I am only highlighting the first 2 points, which is understanding the etymology of Philippine languages. And at the root of the core, basically, why is it that we see language and dialect as the interchange words? So that goes into the next point of the presentation. Define language versus dialect. So Norman, I feel like this is something that resonates with you very strongly. So I want to understand.
Very strong.
Yes. What is language? Let's first define that.
Oh, okay. Hard question. So basically, language. I really didn't have time to look this up. The basic meaning of languages.
Yeah, that's
But
fine.
but if I'm gonna shot in the dark, I would say a language is basically a communication where humans can actually use to communicate to each other, to share ideas, or to share any basic informations, right? So for that one, humans have to create some sort of communications to communicate, right?
Mhm.
So probably back then, they are just making some sounds, right? So for example, if you want to say the word monkey, well, back then they didn't say monkey. They would probably say ooh 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 ooh, and then the receiver would understand that, oh, you meant the monkey because you're making the sound ooh 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 ooh, and then that word probably have evolved into a simpler words, probably ooh, that could mean monkey.
Mhm.
Now, when it comes to dialect, though, let's say that Hannah speaks the Manileño Tagalog, and I speak the Batangueño Tagalog, right? So when it comes to that, so the Batangueño Tagalog and Manileño Tagalog are called dialects. Basically, they are speaking the same language, but when it comes to variations on how you say the language, those are dialects, right? There are gonna be some a couple of words that's gonna be different. So the Batangueño Tagalog is actually a good example. So if you are gonna compare Batangueño and Manileño Tagalog, so for example, the word nakain in Manileño Tagalog, it means that you were eaten. So when you said that, nakain siya ng pating, which means that, oh, he was eaten by the shark, right? And that's understandable. However, when it comes to Batangueño Tagalog and someone asks you, nakain ka ba ng pating? In Batangueño Tagalog, it actually means, have you tried eating a shark before? But when it comes to Manileño Tagalog, it means that, oh, were you eaten by the shark before? And you would be like, well, I'm still here, so I wasn't eaten by a shark before. But however, though, most Manileño would actually understand what does Batangueño were trying to say, because that's just like a common knowledge, basically.
Mhm.
So as you can see, they understand each other, but again, there's like a little variations when it comes to like different dialects, and that's what dialects is. It's just a variation of a language, of the same language that the two speakers are using, basically.
So my understanding of that is that if I'm taking it from just a Manila Leños perspective, I would just see it as it's a slang. It's a form of slang, like it's a batang Tagal. How do you say it? Batang
I
Leño?
mean, it is not a slang, because a slang would means that you are creating a new word. Because a slang means that you are creating a new word so that the other people, especially the older generations, will not understand you. That would be a slang. And then a slang would be carry on to as the language evolved, and some of the slangs in Tagalog were actually became part of the word. So for example, the word baguettes, back then it was a slang. Baguettes means just like um, a young a teenager or a young a youngster, basically. The word bagets now, it's not a slang anymore. It's more like a part of the Tagalog word. But before, though, it was slang.
I feel like what I mean is more like difference of slang and difference of expressions. Like, for example, if I think it would be more understandable in terms of an English perspective, you know how we have a bag called a fanny pack in America?
Mm-hmm.
In British, when they hear the word fanny, it means butt. Like, literally the butt of a person.
Oh,
So they
okay.
laugh. That's what I'm trying to say. Is like, okay, we have the same word. We both have the word fanny, but they're used and applied differently. So what I'm saying is when I hear it from a Manileño's perspective, hearing that Batangas version, I hear it as the way that the words are framed is kind of like the word fanny. Like, the way it's being applied is different, but I know what you're saying. That's what I mean. Perhaps the word slang wasn't the right word I should have said. Maybe it should have been just jargon was used. The jargon and application is different, if that makes sense. That's how I
Yes,
see
that's
it.
exactly it.
Yes. So in that sense, also I pulled it up on my phone so I can give you the definition. I was like, okay, while Norman's saying this, I want to give time for him. So according to Gemini, because I'm using Gemini AI to pull up these definitions, and of course, we got to be careful because
Not a sponsor.
yeah, we're not a sponsor for AI, but it is very convenient, and I acknowledge that we do use it from time to time, but we always have to double check that the information is correct. And from what I read, it is correct. So language and linguistics is a complex and multifaceted concept. Here's a breakdown of key aspects. So the core definition, at its most basic, language is a system of communications that use symbols, whether spoken, written, or signed, to convey meaning. It's a uniquely human capacity that allows us to express thoughts, ideas, emotions, and experiences. So that's basically the definition of a language. And they do give you a lot of more detailed what are the key characteristics of languages. But I'm not going to go into it because it's a very, very long list. But they do address everything that we've learned, Norman, so it is accurate. I could tell you the types of languages since they did mention spoken, written, or signed. Spoken is the most common form of language using sound produced by the vocal tract, which is what Norman also exemplified earlier when he defined it. There is a written language, a representation of spoken language using a system of symbols, letters, or characters. And there is a sign language, which is a visual language used by deaf communities employing hand gestures, facial expressions, and body movements. So we have language as a cognitive faculty. Linguists also study language as a cognitive faculty, exploring how it's acquired by children, how it's proceeded in the brain, and how it might be related to other cognitive abilities. So in summary, languages in linguistics is a complex and dynamic system of communication that is fundamental to human existence. It's a tool for thought, expression, and social interaction, and it plays a crucial role in shaping our understanding of the world. So that's the use of language. Now, the next question I asked was, what is a dialect in terms of linguistics? So dialects are variations of a language spoken by a particular group of people, often within specific geographic regions or social groups. They are characterized by differences in pronunciations, aka accents, vocabulary, which is the example that Norman exemplified between the Batangas Tagalog versus the Manileño Tagalog, vocabulary, grammar, and sometimes even syntax. So a lot of these times, when it comes to dialects, it's like as long, and this one just kind of stood out to me with how Norman defined it in the past. The thing about dialects you need to remember is that if you understand majority of what they're saying, but maybe sometimes it doesn't sound correct or it sounds off, maybe because of jargon, syntactic use, pragmatic, semantic, whatever, most likely it's a dialect because you still understand maybe 70% of what is still being spoken. Like, for example, if I were to speak American English versus a British English speaker versus an Australian speaker. So if you put the three of us in the same room, we still understand English. The difference is that we have an American version. Like, American English differentiates from British English, which these two are almost always like compared on a daily basis. British English is more rounded, is what I've been told or observed as well. They have a very rounded kind of sound. Like when they say that's a water, for example, versus water in American English. So you can hear the O is more elongated, I would say. It sounds fancier too. Like honestly, I'm a big fan of British English. I love their accents. But in any
everyone
case,
does.
but in any case, that's an example of how I would distinguish them in terms of English, is that hearing them compared in that sense. So if Tagalog is hard to understand in terms of the examples that Norman exemplifies, I can try to provide a English counterpart, like kind of like similar, if it'll help. Because sometimes for me, I need an English version to help me understand it in another language, especially when I don't know the other language, you know? So yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. I see.
Yeah. So with that being said, Norman, this is our last question for today's podcast, for this episode in particular. So for our listeners, here is our question for you. So based on our definitions, so what do you call Bisaya, Cebuano, Aklanon, etc.? Philippine dialects or Philippine languages? So that's our food for thought for you guys to consider. And in episode 2, we'll see if you guys got the right answer. And with that being said, I think that is the end of our first episode of TFP. Any last words you wanted to share, Norman?
Well, I really hope that for any Filipinos that watches the podcast, I'm actually wondering, what do you actually call those things that Hannah posted? Do you actually call them dialects, or do you actually call them languages? Because I'm very interested on what everyone says. And if you say dialect, tell me why. And if you say languages, I would like you to tell me why, or why do you think that is?
Yeah. I'd love to hear both sides as well, just to see what the spectrum is in terms of conversation and discourse in the chat. Yeah, but with that being said, great end of the note, and we'll see you guys for episode 2 next time. So see you then.
Thank you. Thanks for watching or listening.
Yeah, bye.
Bye bye.